All right. So yes, not only a complicated topic, but last night, or was it early this morning, Manisha sent me a number of questions. So I'm rearranging my brain so that I can address the questions. So I will be running faster through this content than I was intending. So please put your questions in the chat box so that to flag Manisha should something not be clear or you want more explanation, because I am going to run a little faster than I intended. So most of us had some kind of childhood trauma. In some philosophies or perspectives around trauma, they talk about small t trauma or big T trauma. And small t trauma, most of us have some element of that is unresolved in our childhood. And it could be as simple as not having your diaper changed when you were 2 years old fast enough. And then you end up having some discomfort that doesn't make any sense to you. It could be as simple as failing a test and having a teacher reprimand you in school. So I just want you to think about there's a whole range when we're talking about childhood trauma. Okay, so here we go. So we start with a definition, exactly what is childhood trauma. And this comes from the American National Institute of Mental Health. The experience of an event by a child that is emotionally painful or distressful, which often results in lasting mental and physical effects. Well, we're going to dive deeper into that. And Bessel van der Kolk, who is a leader in the world of trauma and understanding trauma, wrote a groundbreaking book a number of years ago. It is translated into dozens and dozens of languages. The Body Keeps the Score. Said, trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It is the current imprint of that pain, horror, and fear living inside people. So disruptive childhood events are what we call the event that ended up with lasting trauma. So remember, trauma, when we're living with trauma, it is a disruptive event or a distress or stress event that did not get calmed or resolved when we were a child. There wasn't an adult present in that moment that effectively helped co-regulate and help us come to calm and resolution around whatever happened. And here we have Oprah Winfrey from a book she wrote with Dr. Bruce Perry, where she asks lots of questions of Dr. Bruce Perry, and he answers. It's actually quite a brilliant book because you get an insight of one person's childhood trauma, and Oprah Winfrey had quite a bit of it. And she's become a leader in the United States around laws to protect children from abuse. And of course, abuse, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, sexual, are high reasons or high experiences for living with trauma. Again, all of those events of abuse may happen, but if some adult intervenes and is able to bring to calm, that person may become an adult and not be carrying the distress. So she has made it very public about her struggle with weight that was connected to a number of incidents in her life, including her struggle with weight. So in her discussion in the book, she says, your past is not an excuse, but it is an explanation, offering insight into the questions so many of us ask ourselves, why do I behave the way I behave? Why do I feel the way I feel? And I certainly relate to this because I loved children. I was an early childhood educator. My husband and I adopted a little girl, and then I would get furiously angry, and I ended up smacking, particularly the oldest one who had the most sort of acting out behavior. And I would ask myself, what's going on? And my own childhood physical, emotional, and verbal abuse was bubbling up. And I needed to deal with my childhood trauma. So risk factors include this. And I want you to notice this list and pay attention. In the session guide, which I think Manisha's put into the chat box, and you have it available. All of this information is in there, but right for now, I want you to pay attention to the list and just notice, did your mother have maternal depression? 25% of women who give birth end up feeling postpartum depression. And when you are in depression, you are disconnected and you're not really present to caregiving. So that's a question to ask yourself. Did you experience physical, emotional, or sexual abuse when you were a child? And the people that say, oh, the spanking I got from my parents did me good, the research absolutely contradicts that 100%. Nobody is allowed to spank anybody in a prison, right? It's called assault. Physical and emotional neglect. Did you not get adequate food, shelter, support, a decent bed to sleep in? Domestic violence, was that happening in the home when two adults that are supposed to be caregivers are engaged in basic war? They're taking away any sense of emotional safety. Divorce. Now, this can be sometimes creating safety, and oftentimes it can create a sense of abandonment for a child. Mental illness. Again, people dealing with mental illness, they are disconnected from themselves and functioning in the world, and disconnected from their loved ones. And children need to know that someone is present, an adult with an adult brain that makes decisions and keeps them safe. Substance abuse, same thing, creates disconnection. Incarceration of a caregiver, that's pretty clear. Hospitalization, again, the parent is missing. Poverty makes it very, very challenging. It's just a huge distress and minimizes the resources and support available, and often parents end up in such a distress that, again, they're not really present to the children's needs. Discrimination may kick in. That event can happen around racism or other kinds of discrimination. Poor community resources. There's not a teacher or a boys and girls club or a big brother or a big sister to fill in the gaps for a child's needs. And homelessness, of course, has many aspects of missing out on needs. And maybe there were little opportunities in your community for support. So these have all been researched. They're called risk factors. And now I want to move into protective factors. So there are protective factors that we grow up with that can protect us from the ingesting and holding on to the distress of events that happen to in childhood. Again, I want you to pay attention to what existed when you were growing up as a child. Are you unconditionally loved by somebody? This creates a sense of safety, which is key to trauma. Did you have caring extended family? For many people, a grandparent's home or a grandmother was that place of safety where the shaking could happen, to let go of the distressful event and to be told, I love you, you're here now, you're okay. Basic needs met, food, shelter, clothing. Clear rules, routines, boundaries for structure. There is a sense of safety when people say yes to what's safe. An adult says to a child, no, that's not safe. No, that's not good for you. And it's programming some discipline into the child's mind. So no's and yeses are very important. Although I used to teach how to say yes instead of no by saying, after your chores are done, you may, or after you save up the money, you may buy a Cadillac, so that you never needed to say that harsh word, no, but it was always after. It's a great little rule. So guidance and consistency. Was there consistency in the home, or were there periodically these surprises? My father had a huge anger management issue, and you wouldn't have a clue what you had done wrong for him to blast out and maybe hit or call you a name. Or for me, he used to say, you stupid girl, you stupid, stupid girl. That went into my brain and created emotional trauma for me. Opportunities to contribute at home and appreciation for contribution. Thank you. Thank you. My mother, as I did have some protective factors, my mother used to say, thank you for the improvement. You just did good enough. It never had to be perfect. And friendships. Did you have friendships where you felt totally comfortable being who you are with your emotions and your dreams? Inspiring role models. I had a teacher, Dr. Drew, oh gosh, Waylon Drew in high school was a role model for me. I had never seen a man cry, and he used to read poetry to us from the English text that we were studying, and he would weep. And I just fell in love with this teacher, and he provided a whole different role model for me. The role model was so powerful that I ended up marrying a man that had a sense of gentleness, the same as Waylon Drew. Opportunities to contribute in the community. Oftentimes our self-esteem and self-worth is elevated in the community by opportunities to volunteer or take classes or be in a sports team where we're acknowledged. For many children, their trauma is not being seen or heard. And now I want to move into, as I hope you had some protective factors that you paid attention to. Let me just go back there for a minute. Check off for you. This is really important. The protective factors, they are listed in the session guide. Check off for you protection factors that you had in your life. This is a really good list. And now I want you to pay attention to which of these protective factors you don't have in your life now. And I want you to consider, my wish for you is that you seek out fulfilling these now. Really, the key to healing childhood trauma is to start to give yourself what you didn't get when you were growing up, as if you become your own best parent, your own best wise, healed parent. Just take a look at this list once more and ask yourself, what can I do to increase protective factors in my life? And now we'll move to recognize how trauma shows up. Trauma shows up in very subtle ways, but if we pay attention, we can start to discern it. One of the ways I picked up that I was living with trauma was when I broke my own values and hit my own children. That was a breaking point for me that took me into therapy. Also, I heard the voice of my father when I hit my children, a voice of him saying, and you thought you were going to be a better parent than me, and look at you. And I went, oh my gosh, my dad is living in my head. That's another signal that actually I didn't put in the slide deck, but really good clue. Do you hear the voices of the big important adults in your life, the influential adults in your life? Do you hear sometimes their voices in your head criticizing you? So this guy is triggered. So this is what an exaggeration of trauma. And what is he seeing? He's actually seeing a teddy bear. And the teddy bear is triggering his amygdala that he is in danger. And why is his amygdala triggering to give him the message that he's in danger, even though it makes no sense, because all he's doing is looking at a little fluffy teddy bear? Is because when he was a little boy, he was in danger around a bear, and nobody debriefed it with him, and he just swallowed all of this heart beating, nerve ends, the urge to turn around and run and hide was all swallowed, cemented sort of into his physicality and his brain. Fear, fear, fear. So Gabor Mate, who is our Canadian expert, he's become that Canadian expert in trauma, in his book, The Return to Ourselves, says, our brains are wired for connection, but trauma rewires our brains for protection. That's why relationships are difficult for wounded people. So that's one of the indicators too, that when people don't come to another person for support, that little boy was left on his own. And then the brain gets trained to not seek support. Okay, so how does it turn up? People often say, I feel anxiety or anxiousness, or I had an anxiety attack. And I want to know the details. What is going on in the body? Heart beating, nerve ends, urge to move back, urge to run, stimulation, stomach going kind of nauseous, an urge to want to vomit, depression, stuck in heaviness, not being able to move, foggy brain, very low energy. Anxiety's got high energy, to run, to flee. Avoidance. That man will avoid teddy bears, avoid anything to do with bears. Storybooks, will not read to his children about the 3 bears and Goldilocks. Too anxious for him. Flashbacks. That guy may have nightmares about bears. Interpersonal problems. You can see that often some of these reactions don't make any sense for loved ones in the environment. Emotional dysregulation or easily activated nervous system. The amygdala goes off really easily, really easily. So I just had a client yesterday, and I used the word safe, and she said, I got triggered by that word safe. It has to do with her being in a fire, and we didn't have time to get into the details of that word, but I'll tell you, I'll be using it very carefully or not at all unless she brings it up, and we'll learn about what's going on in the nervous system when she hears that word. It is as simple as that, a word. And then unaccountable thoughts, negative self-talk. It's estimated that about 2/3 of the average person's self-talk is negative. Also, emotions that don't make any sense, physical symptoms and behaviors. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in those in a minute. And unhealthy self-soothing. Okay, so unaccountable emotions, all of a sudden bursting into tears. I don't remember what my child was doing that day completely. I remember that there was an ice storm and she jumped in front of a car. I do remember that. And I just lost it. I just screaming at her, you want to kill yourself? Then let me do it. I was unbelievably sense of out of control. And the rage was out of proportion. And that thought, that's a crazy thought. You want to kill yourself, let me do it. Such shaming around what happened in that moment. So unaccountable thoughts that make, if you back up and look at it, make no sense. Very, very common one here is I'm no good, or I'm unworthy, or I don't deserve, or I'm unlovable. And I go, oh my goodness, there's a trauma story underneath that thought. Unaccountable physical symptoms. In my 30s, I had a lot of illness, irritated bowel syndrome attacks, cardiac arrhythmia attacks, strep throat, flus, all kinds of eczema. I'd break out in all kinds of rashes. In my 70s, I'm healthier than I was in my 30s. Oh, and by the way, about 75% of what we take to the doctor, if you think about all of the medications that we take for anxiety and depression and other ailments that we have, headaches, cardiac arrhythmia attacks that I had, diarrhea, constipation, often are the result of a out of control nervous system. And unaccountable behaviors, often self-soothing. More alcohol than you need, eating more than you need. People will pick their fingers, gambling, heavy drugs like illegal drugs, workaholism, sexism, all the addictions, trying to self-soothe. Workaholism, all the isms that are some kind of addiction, are trying to soothe and calm down, distract the nervous system, the amygdala that's fired from the sense of danger. All right, now, before I move into the steps to healing, are there any questions or needs for clarification and/or any observations around the protective factors or the risk factors that you'd like to share? And Manisha will report what she sees. And if you've got any clarifications you want, ask me. But I am interested in any insights from the risk factors and the protective factors. Manisha, so you're seeing nothing?
Yes, you're right. I'm not seeing anything.
You're not seeing anything. Okay, so I just hope people are then like sponges. So let's get into some first steps to healing, and then I'll address the questions that were sent. Okay. Well, we're back to the book, What Happened to You, written by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry. So Dr. Bruce Perry says, if we truly want to understand ourselves, we need to understand our history, our true history, because the emotional residue of our past follows us. Oh, we're talking about that traumatic story or event that did not get calmed or resolved, provides a residue, is still present in some way in the present moment. True trauma treatment therapy puts that experience in the past. It's not like you'll forget it. It's in the past. It happened. It's still not okay. It's still not okay what I did to my kids. Fortunately, I've been able to make amends, and it's all been calmed down. That moment with my oldest when she jumped in front of a car during an ice storm. That's all been resolved. So the parents can help children, even when they become adults, resolve. And the other point I really want to make here for parents is that you might think an event is traumatic for your child, but somehow you managed to contain it or make repairs and calm it down in the moment. And you might be surprised at something you said or did that really impacted your child's sensitivities, and they might still be living with it. And one of my kids told me as an adult that they're nervous getting dressed because when they were about 6 years old going off to school, I said, that t-shirt looks awful with those pants. Go change your t-shirt. And from that moment on, that child was very unsure about ever getting dressed because of my judgment. And so she's very artistic and sensitive to appearance. And, thank heaven she told me. So then we were able to make some amends and move forward. So know your ACEs or PACEs score in the session guide. If you haven't already downloaded it, please do so. There's a link to take a very simple inventory of what happened to you as a child before the age of 18. This study actually came out of the research of a weight loss doctor who, when he saw that about 50% of his patients were making significant progress, that 50% of them would drop out of the program. And he got very curious about why they would do that. And he eventually found out that the majority of those people that dropped out of the weight loss program were using extra weight as unconscious protection. They were sexually abused as children. And that fat was a protection for them. It can also be a protection around physical abuse, that we get comfortable with that extra space. That study from this weight loss doctor turned into interviewing 30,000 people and coming up with the top 10 events that can happen in a child's life that can be experienced as trauma in the adult years. Now, when I did the risk factors, a number of those events that the ACE factor asks about is in that list. So the ACE factor is about adverse childhood experiences, and the PACEs is positive experiences. And I think I shouldn't have put the A in there. Yeah, I shouldn't. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Yeah, ACE. Look at the ACEs, look at the PACEs, okay? Very much aligned with risk factors and protective factors. And yeah, all the literature on it, the same website that I've given you the link to, is very insightful. Notice and attend to your inner child. If you've never thought about inner child work, please consider. It's all over the internet. I work with people doing inner child work, and it's what I described before, is training yourself to give yourself what you didn't get as a child. With children, if we can intervene, if we have the opportunity to intervene with their trajectory of carrying on a traumatic event, all the better. So there's lots of literature, lots of books, and there are resources, and again, in the session guide, about noticing and attending to your inner child. Your inner child actually is a metaphor or represents your emotional self, and your emotional self represents your nervous system reactions, your autonomic nervous system reactions. Let me say that again. Inner child work is a representation of your emotional self, which represents your autonomic nervous system reactions. And I will put another piece on it. Also represents what is called the adapted child, which are the thoughts that got adapted growing up about how I need to manage myself to keep myself safe in moments when the parents or the adults in charge are not providing protection. And I have to provide my own protection, and I can adapt. And somebody in their question asked about fawning, and fawning is one way of adapting to get what we need. We try to please the adults, notice how we can get their attention, how we can get their praise, and we put on a smile even when we're not feeling happy to get them to give us what we need. Now, apparently many survivors do not like the word fawning because it sounds kind of phony. They prefer appeasing the adults to get their needs met. Do some self-exploration. And at this point, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, put your feet on the floor, and I'm going to ask you just a few little observations. And by the way, if you are getting triggered listening to this, watching this session with us, please take care of yourself. Go get a glass of water, drink some water, take a few belly breaths, put your hand on your belly and breathe in and out while letting the exhale go down out your feet so that you feel somewhat grounded. Oh, if you're up to it, close your eyes and just go inside. I'm just going to ask you to think about these pieces of self-exploration, which again are in the session guide. What was going on in your family and your community throughout your childhood? Just imagine sitting in the chair where you are and you're looking at a video screen or a TV screen. Give yourself some distance while you think about, oh, what were the risk factors? What were the protective factors when I was growing up? Who provided a sense of danger and who provided a sense of comfort or safety? Where were the places that provided some risk and the places that provided comfort and safety? What were the activities? Were there animals that provided risk or comfort? How was discipline used, or was there no discipline but merely punishment? Punishment says you are wrong, you did wrong. A discipline says, what can we learn from this mistake, this error? So which did you grow up with? Discipline, guidance, or punishment? What messages did you receive? Good, bad, or ugly about children? What messages? And messages come in words, body language, facial expressions. What messages did you get about being seen and heard and acknowledged? What messages did you get about feeling your feelings and expressing your feelings? What messages did you get about hugging and touching? What did your skin receive? You know, the body has its own, almost its own language. What messages did you receive about disagreeing or conflict? Was it okay to disagree? And when you think about these messages, what is the ideal message for you that you might like to replace? Again, being the caregiver of your own mind, body, nervous system. Okay, so come on back and let's move on. So consider researching your trauma roots. So I went back and sort of interviewed neighbors from where I grew up as an adult, curious whether my perception of my childhood was actually had any reality. It just really helped me calm down my brain about wondering why, the same as Bruce Perry's book and Oprah Winfrey's book, What Happened to You? I wanted some facts about what happened to me. And I also asked some aunts and uncles that I felt comfortable asking about my dad and learning what a dreadful childhood he had, because he wouldn't talk about any of these things. And no wonder he used the word stupid so much, because he didn't get out of grade 8 himself. And he started working as a hired hand when he was 14, but he would never really share these things. So I'm busy being this researcher, finding out about my roots and finding out that, oh my goodness, we were the poor ones in the community. It wasn't just my imagination, and that there were people that were keeping an eye on us. I'll never forget Walter Beath coming to pick up a broken bicycle that I had created for myself and my brother's friend. They used to tease me going up and down the hills on the bicycle to get to the bus to take to high school. And one day I decided that I would let the boys go ahead of me, and then I would tease them by bumping my front tire of my bicycle into theirs. Well, we ended up with the three of us in the ditch with 3 broken bicycles. And Walter Beath, who was the superintendent of the high school, and I want you to notice, this is community support, community resource. We went to a phone and we phoned my mom, and my mom said, your father doesn't need to know this. Your father will not know about this. And Walter Beath picked us up and took us home, and he did something with the bicycles, and my father never knew. So that Walter Beath and my mother were protective factors in that story. So there were people that kept an eye on us. You want to just know that for yourself. Who was there for you and what didn't work? And do manage your nervous system. That's key for looking after inner child work. And I'm very excited to share with you that this month, my latest book, Return to Center, Simple Strategies to Navigate Distress, Depression, and Disconnection, has won a national award. It's won the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association's Counseling Biannual Counseling book. And for under $10, you can get it on Amazon.ca. I think I also popped it into the session guide. So we've done a session on the book and the nervous system. We can certainly do it again, especially if you alert Manisha to that request. And find the right support for you. And why did I put a question mark next to the little board that says advice? Take advice cautiously. Ask, does this resonate with me? Does this bring me to calm and confidence, or does this have me feeling shaky? Trust your nervous system. Okay, quick little quiz just to make sure you're still there, still participating, still with me. Okay. Social relationships increase likelihood of longer lifespan. What's this got to do with childhood trauma? I hope I've already demonstrated it through Walter Beath, my mom. Relationships is where we typically get healed. So social relationships increase likelihood of longer lifespan. Which door is it? Just put 2 or 1, 2 or 3. Just put 1, 2 or 3 in the chat box, which one you think, based on some really extensive research. Extensive.
2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3,
Okay.
3,
There's some smart cookies here. Drum roll,
3,
please.
3.
3, 3. Okay. 3, 3, 3. Wow. Well, it's actually 50%, which is still quite significant. And so Julianne Holt-Lundstad in 2010 announced, after about 10 years of studying isolation, and many people, because of childhood trauma, do end up isolating. Many children will not speak up, will hide, will try to make themselves invisible if they are living in a significantly abusive home. Others, by the way, will become very rebellious, very loud. And I had a brother who used to say, "Hey, big boy," say that. I had a big brother who, to my father, if my father said anything verbally abusive, I had a brother who would say, "Hey, big boy, why don't you say that again and impress us?" And my dad would hit him on the cheek or on the face, and he would turn the other cheek and say, "Yeah, big fella, why don't you hit the other cheek?" My dad would just get all just out of this world blustery. So yeah, these two opposites can often happen in the family. And of course, my brother that was outrageously rebellious with my father ended up being sort of the black sheep of the family. But actually, he's a very talented architectural designer. Again, some of my mother's influence. So now we've got time for your questions. If you've got any other questions about the content, please let me know. And then we'll do, after I answer these questions, then we'll open it, we'll stop the recording and we'll do some questions and answers. So ways to show someone who has experienced trauma active listening. Well, I would suggest you use active listening when, oh, typo error. Oh, well, I just popped these in just before we came online. Anyway, that's supposed to say ways to show someone who has experienced trauma active listening. You active listen anytime somebody is showing distress. Now, showing distress, which is all of those behaviors that we showed, it can be behaviors, it can be emotions, it can be a rash coming out. Well, you can active listen to a rash. Oh, it looks like you've got some nervousness going on with your rash. Active listening it creates a psychologically or emotionally safe space. So active listening is welcome anytime, actually anytime. For example, wow, you look really pleased with what you accomplished there. Active listening affirms, says to the person that you're listening to or noticing, "I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you." And we all want to be seen, heard, and acknowledged, and have that sense of being supported in this world. And of course, finding emotionally safe places to be. And we have done, Manisha and I, we've done a session on exquisite active listening. And if you'd like that repeated, again, I suggest you let Manisha know that you'd like a session specifically on listening. We also did another one called 4 Forms of Support, and that one is a little more extensive than just the listening. It's when to ask questions, when not to ask questions, when to listen, when it's time to ask if somebody wants some feedback or wants some guidance or wants to do some brainstorming for problem solving. Okay, so this one, it was, oh, this is the complicated one. Somatic exercises have become popular on social media. With that, I have seen posts that functional freeze a stuck vagus nerve, good for you for knowing what the vagus nerve is different than depression. Is this true? Can you speak more about this? I haven't already spoken about it, but I can say to you, depression is a mental illness diagnosis. So clinical depression is a mental illness diagnosis, and there's a number of criteria for it. And we all, at some points, feel depressed. Depressed is a state of giving up. And we want to pay attention to when we feel depressed and we're ready to give up and let go. Sometimes you need to let go of a relationship. Sometimes you need to let go of a business that's not working out. Sometimes we need to let go of trying to change somebody else and say, okay, I need to let go of that idea. It's maybe even just an idea. So there's a place for feeling depressed and letting go. Functional freeze is you're in danger and you're like this. Mammals, when they're being chased, picture the rabbit being chased by the fox. If the fox is catching up with them, it's a nervous system reaction that says I can keep safe by freezing, functional freeze. They we're recommended to do this if we end up facing a bear. Freeze, curl up, and you play dead. Freeze, fight. See if the danger moves away. So it's a specific nervous system reaction, where depression has has to do with the thoughts that you're having, and if you get stuck in feeling depressed, then that needs to be addressed. So if you're spending too many hours in bed, and it's a very head feels like full of toilet paper, thoughts are really about how you've messed up and you're a failure, the world isn't safe, I'm not safe, there's nothing I can do, and you can hardly move. You can maybe move and speak quietly, but a freeze is different. Freeze is, oh, if I just stay tight and look this way, look that way, maybe the danger will dissipate. Please ask me more questions about that when I finish answering the other questions, if that's not clear. Can you treat childhood trauma in a classroom situation as a group? All the best with that. If we'll tell you this, that if you can make your classroom a safe place for kids to feel what they feel, share what they think, then you are preventing childhood trauma, creating emotional safety, and those children may be going home, and there may be trauma. You cannot treat what's going on at home unless the parents get their trauma attended to. And really, young children technically aren't living with trauma, they're living with abuse. And the abuse, if the result of the abuse gets trapped, then later they're living with trauma. I hope that makes sense. Please ask me clarifying questions if it doesn't. But you certainly can create, just like my beloved teacher, Mr. Drew, did in the English classroom. He created an environment for me that allowed me to really feel tender and change my mind about a decision about men weren't safe, really. Yeah. Childhood trauma and its, again, I was typing really fast this morning, its impact on domestic violence. It's more like domestic violence has the impact on childhood trauma, right? I hope we've made that clear in those. It's a huge, huge, huge risk factor. It's domestic violence is like sending children to war, witnessing war. And we know that journalists end up with post-traumatic stress disorder from going and reporting on war, let alone the soldiers themselves that come back with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we put these little small people in the middle of a war when there's domestic violence going on. How can government policies be used to mitigate childhood trauma? Hello, more money for mental health, please. You know, there's a big movement on, I'm a certified Canadian counselor, and in Alberta, anybody can call themselves a counselor or a therapist. We're pushing to be regulated. And why do we're pushing to be regulated? For a number of reasons. One is that nobody can just call themselves a therapist or a counselor, and people paying money for not getting actual informed trauma treatment care. And the other is that the health insurances will more likely provide funding. Only about 50% of the health insurance covers my services. So I have about 50% of the people that come to see me, their health insurance will cover it. Some choose to come and see me anyway because psychologists have become very expensive. And other people say, well, thanks for the complimentary session, Patricia, but my coverage is only for psychologists. So regulation is important, funding for mental health awareness, getting better foster care. I mean, there's so many children that need to go into foster care. So all the funding needs for the soft skills for care of people. And of course, we're having even seniors being traumatized. The shelters are full of abused seniors. And so it's through the gamut. Yeah. So thank you for that question. I don't want to get too much into which party I would support, by the way. Please speak on the difference of childhood trauma, speak of fight, flight, fawning. I think I talked a bit about fawning and that many survivors prefer the word appease. It's when you're a child and you have to figure out, how do I get mom to feed me? Or how do I get mom to really listen to me? Or dad, how do I get dad to touch me gently? Or how do I get dad to smile at me and make face contact? And so you do this kind of all this plea, and it ends up as adults saying, oh, darn, I'm a people pleaser. I was quite a people pleaser. I'd find the person in the group who didn't like me and find a gift for them until I had a therapist tell me what I was doing. I was totally unaware of it. So often with fawning is really, really, really rewarded in our culture. I do prefer myself, actually, the word appease. I was appeasing people. I was trying to appease them to get what I wanted. I wanted to be seen and heard, even from people that weren't that key in my life, somebody in a group. Fight and flight is a response to feeling emotional danger. I'm feeling emotional danger, and I'll either fight, I'll defend myself, and I'll argue. And some people are terrified of being wrong, so we can get into right fighting. And flight or flee, so common. Just think about the number of times you or other people walked out the door, and the other thing that's showing up that looks like flight or flee is cutoffs. Cutoffs in families, cutoffs in friends. It's become rampant since COVID. That's a very sad place to be. All right, so the bad news is that childhood trauma lives on till you die. If you don't attend to it, you don't give yourself what you've been longing for, what's troubling you from your childhood. And the good news is you can start today to start paying attention to what that inner child needs for you. By the way, Manisha and I did a session on it was totally inner child work. And if you'd like that repeated, inner child work, it's really hard when you're a pickle to see that you're in the pickle jar. So that's why therapy is so effective, the outside perspective, because often you're not aware of your thoughts. I certainly wasn't aware of my thoughts, couldn't figure out why I was having these anger rages. People today can't believe that I had an anger management issue. And all of it, no matter what you do, first steps or more steps, please do it with self-compassion. What does that mean? Gentleness with yourself, gentle. And a bonus here is I do have an ebook that I wrote during COVID called Understanding Trauma, what to do for yourself and others. You just need to email me and I'll give it to you. And also I'm always open to a complimentary Zoom chat. By the way, all my counseling sessions, the first session's always complimentary. And bless you for turning up to this session on inner child work. And I